Anybody that was going to?
No, we're good.
I still don't see us on Instagram.
Give it 1 second. What the heck? Is your live here? All right.
Are we live?
There we are.
Hey, we are live. All right.
You on?
Yep.
All right.
A little delayed, but.
All right. Looks like we've got 5 viewers so far. Hello, everybody.
What's up, guys?
Already got a question. What's up with your under canopy lights?
Ooh, good question. Good question. Rick?
Yeah, no, it's we're in the process of putting the final certifications on it, and we should have it within the next 60 days.
So are we expecting like a Q1 of 2025 launch, or?
Yeah, as a matter of fact.
Okay. Yeah, so around January turn of the year, we'll
Yes.
have some under canopy lights hitting the market.
And this is going to differ from quite a few other brands. We're going to have a switch on it that will enable, for those who have power issues, they'll be able to, it's 120 watts and 90 watts. So if you have power limitation issues, you'll be able to flip the switch and kick it down to 90 watts. So that's a feature that I don't think anybody else has got on theirs.
Yep. So Rick put some in my hands recently, and we're tweaking them and testing them at the moment. I've tested a few of the different main brands out on the market right now. And I've definitely, as always, I have my ear to the industry. And I see that a lot of people are talking about the power limitations and what they're up against, obstacles as far as wanting to run under canopy lights, but having trouble getting them in their facility. It's one thing if you have the luxury of you're building a new facility, you can spec things out in that way. But if you're retrofitting them into your scenario, trying to ensure that you have enough dehumidification, enough HVAC, and then in turn, enough power in general. That was something that I experienced with our current electrical setup at the facility that I'm the director of cultivation for, testing lights and popping breakers on these under canopy lights. So, it's kind of a happy accident. At one point, we were running them dimmed down at a lesser wattage, lesser percentage, and we were still able to hit really significant percentage increases of yield to the tune of like 20 to 30%. And so we decided to offer, Rick and myself and the team putting our heads together decided to offer a lower wattage option that still gives you these percentage returns, these percentage increases, 10, 15, 20, 30% increases in yield, depending on where your benchmark and your baseline is at to begin with. And that's what I experienced. So you really don't need all the wattage necessarily. So yeah, we should have some more information about that coming out soon.
I should also note that after we do the arithmetic, and I looked at the market, it's still, jury's still out on a final price, but it looks like it's coming in less than what the market is right now. So you'll save some money.
Awesome.
Someone had a question about the rebate program and asked from Spring Farms if they gave you a call, could you help understand the rebate program? Interested in buying 20 Linea or Verta lights through the program if we can make it happen.
What
Rebate.
I missed that. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'll back up here. Spring Farms is asking about the rebate program. and they're interested in getting 20 Linea or Verta lights through the program if that can happen.
Those lights are do have DLC certification, so they do qualify for energy rebates. But obviously, the amount of rebate varies from utility to utility, and they're changing their policies almost daily. So it behooves the person to, do the research, find out what the what the policy is at your local utility. But our lights do qualify for that rebate.
Yep, I myself have done a lot of communication with different rebate companies, and I've explored rebates with multiple lights. SpecGrade seems to be among the most qualified with certain utilities like Michigan Consumers. They qualify for an additional something like 15 or 20% on top of the base rebate because they're made in America. But every municipality is different. Some states are really great about it, some not so much. Many of them, like Colorado and Washington, are starting to close off their programs. And so it is at this time kind of a limited thing. It's something that if you're interested in it, you should jump on it quickly, because those are like pools of funds that dry up over time as they get used up. And they're not going to last forever. They may introduce new ones at certain points. Yeah. And then for larger orders, some rebate companies will offer advances on 80% of your rebate. That's something we've been seeing that's been a really good tool, especially, like I said, for Michigan Consumers customers, for Excel Colorado, and there's a few other spots. There's probably a list of like 10 states or utility providers around the country that give really beneficial rebates. And then the rebate companies will give you an advance on the rebate for a fee, which comes out of the rebate itself. And it allows that to be the down payment on your lights. And with HPS replacement, it's often a wattage saved factor. So there's usually an equation that will tell you pretty damn close to how much you stand to get from your rebate. And there's lots of options that can help you through that process.
We had another comment in here about using 3 HPS lights for a 4-week bed. Do you have a question around that, or you're just looking for advice there? Juana00.
Could you repeat that, please, Melissa?
Yeah, there's just a comment that they use 3 HPS lights with a 4-week veg with 8-foot high ceilings. Not quite a question, so I'm just, if you have a question around that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Any comments, Jake?
It's been years and years since I've vegged with HPS. I think that you'll find that you'll have a lot more success vegging with LED. Even people that still prefer to flower with HPS, many of them veg with LED. So trying to kind of extrapolate from that, I think you could shorten your veg time from 4 weeks. It really depends on your plant density. But as many of us know, a really common layout is around 6 plants per 4x4, which oftentimes equates to 6 plants per light. And the 14-day, 2-week veg tends to be a pretty popular and common program, either untopped or single topped. So that's a good benchmark for people to aim for if you're newer to the space or newer to the style. We've got hundreds, if not thousands, of growers across the industry demonstrating this common program where they have success with a 2-week veg in 1 gallon or 2 gallon pots, something like it. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
They did follow up to the first part was that they have a 11 by 16 room with 12 plants. and just is asking what lights and how many lights would you suggest there?
With 8-foot ceiling height, the Verta is definitely a good option. And if it's only veg and you're moving them into a flower room, we have a really great deal on our Flora 300-watt veg lights. They're a veg specific spectrum. They're an extremely robust and hardy light, like bulletproof. And I've got a video that I'm going to release soon that I took of the lights after I sprayed them. And yeah, they're very well built. So those are a good option for 8-foot ceilings for veg only. But if you're going to flower in place, the Verta 6F 720 watt is going to be the best option with that ceiling height. It's an all-purpose spectrum. You can veg under it, and you can also, of course, flower under it.
You know, Jake, beside the low price that we're normally offering this week, we're running a sale with an extra 20, as low as the price is, there's another 25% off.
This is true. They were already on closeout. Thank you, Rick. If you didn't know and you are watching, we have a Labor Day sale going on. So for like the Verta and the Linea, it's an additional $50 off that we've never offered before. It's generally for smaller orders, but if you have a larger order you're interested in, DM me and we can work something out. But we're trying to support the small growers. A lot of people contacting us regularly really want to get their hands on the lights. So we're trying to make that easier for people to do, trying to be helpful. And so, yeah, we have an extra 25% off of all of our lights, and all that information is currently on mine and SpecGrade's page. And you can message me or message SpecGrade's page directly on Instagram if you have questions. Go to SpecGrade's website, email them, call them, whatever's easiest. We're all here to answer questions and help you get these lights while the sale's going on. It ends on Labor Day. Is that right, Alyssa?
Yep.
Is that midnight on Labor Day that it ends?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. He said he's going to go with the Verta. Thank you.
It's with
Another question just came in about red stems, to touch on this subject, and far reds after lights are off and during daytime with the whites.
Yeah, what's up, Joey Grown, and what's up, everybody? Thank you guys for all joining. Red stems, that's a tricky one. As far as it pertains to lights, there's a lot that we can go into on that subject with nutrients. And, I don't, other than the distinction between legacy style lighting like HPS and then LEDs in general, I don't think that the red stem factor is as like light specific. You got to factor in your program, the genetics, the nutrients that you're using. I've been trialing some different nutrient lines, while virtually every other factor is fixed or a control within the grow, the irrigation schedule, the lights, training, topping, veg time, all that stuff. And then I've even seen a difference between the red stems on certain genetics that we have a lot of historical experience with. So that one's a little tough to talk about with lights. I know you can get into different MPK ratios and what macros and micros can contribute to that pH. It's pretty broad and elusive. So I don't know how much I can share. If you have something more specific that you want to ask about that topic, but I'm seeing the far reds, the most common and popular program that we're seeing right now is 5 to 15 minutes after lights off. So once your overhead lights shut off from their 12 or so hours on cycle, you run the far reds for 5 to 15 minutes. It initiates the Emerson effect. You're kind of mimicking the sun going down at the end of the day, and it helps the plants essentially go to sleep faster. It speeds up the flower cycle and the ripening process, to put it simply. Some people are also running them before the lights turn on for 5 to 15 minutes. That part seems a little more optional preference, kind of in the experimental stages. The jury's kind of out on that one. So it seems debatable, but some people run it with success. So that's what we're seeing with the far reds as far as how they're being applied. We're not currently doing much with running them like full time necessarily throughout the 12 hours of the photo period during the flower phase.
Awesome. Okay. Our giveaway winner. Hi. Giveaway winner asks, first off, just thank you so much. I won the Verta 6F with the UV and the far red light. I've never ran anything like this. So my question is, do I run the UV and far red through the whole grow, veg, and flower?
Yo, congrats on winning. I just touched on the far red. All that information that I spit out is available on our Dankums Hunter far red and UV schedule. That is on a picture post. It's laid out in great detail about what Max was running when he was running our SpecGrades over his canopy. And the UV are really, there's lots of trialing to be done, but the most effective trials seem to be later flower. And that schedule is also laid out where the UVA, and it's UVA, not UVB or UVC, which Rick pointed out to me the other day, and that's an important thing to note. But that exposure is beginning more in middle flower. Doesn't mean that you can't run it in early flower. This is just a program that we've seen run from a grower that many people know and trust, and they know he does good work. So that's one of the tested schedules, and that's kind of the foundation that we're giving growers to jump off from and do their own experimenting and hopefully come back to us with reports. And we've actually, thankfully, Rick passed this along to me. We have a couple SpecGrade clients, two clients that are totally independent that reported back on case studies with the UV and found an average of I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, 1% increase in both cannabinoids and also a 1% increase in terpene content, which is huge. 1% in cannabinoids, it, you know, unfortunately, as many growers would say, cannabinoid content does make a difference in the white market. And so that's a beneficial factor. But 1% increase on terpenes is huge. And that's really what the UV exposure is meant to do, is mimicking the UV from the sun. It's supposed to enhance the oils, the terpene profile, which are a defense mechanism that the plant puts out to protect itself in nature as it's making an effort to be pollinated before the season is over. And so UV is a harsh form of light. So those oils that the plant generates helps protect and preserve itself. And so that's what we're mimicking with that. And thank you, Joey Grown, by the way, for the props, man. Appreciate you tuning in.
We're showing some love in the chat. We've got another question from Rob. Do you recommend a specific spectrum for mother plants?
Rob, we've got two spectrums that we're dealing with for the most part, our veg specific spectrum and our A1 spectrum, which is in our Linea and Verta flagship flower lights. They are all purpose spectrums. I think it's kind of a toss up because I've seen both of them in a lot of settings, both used for those purposes for moms. And I know some people that really love the veg specific spectrum, which is a little more blue dominant. Thank you. Perfect. Where's our veg spectrum?
Upper right.
Upper right is the K1 veg spectrum. So you can see that blue spike is a little stronger. There's less red. And I use those over my veg plants. I really like them. Those are the super sturdy and robust. I mean, these things were dripping from a spray that I had applied, and they're just built solid. I mean, there's a lot of detail that we can go into about why you really need that. With my experience, I have that all documented on my Instagram. But the spectrum is great, but also the all-purpose spectrum over moms. A little bit of that reds, they seem to do really well with that. So you can't go wrong. As far as like your standard acceptable DLI for a mom program, I mean, there is a range, but common DLI, the Pay 1 Spectrum and the Flora 300 watt veg light, they're really all you need. And it's a lot better bang for your buck if you're only ever going to be using these over moms. That being said, if you want the red spectrum, if you want more wattage, if you're going to have the lights farther away from the plants, the Verta is another great option, or any of our lights with the A1 all-purpose spectrum.
Perfect. Okay. We have Pinnacle Systems LLC in here, throwing in some information about Far Red. We have somebody asking, hey, Rick, are there plans for releasing a dedicated grow tent light specifically for a 5x5 tent?
The industry seems to vacillate. They're using the same all the way across the board from one manufacturer to the other. We're all using the same light, whether it's 4x4 or 5x5. I think the 5x5 seems to be a marketing thing. You're just pulling the light back a little further, so the beam is wider. But there is no 4x4 light and no 5x5 light. It's just a marketing, from what I can tell, from looking at our own light and how everybody's marketing in the industry. It's the same light. If you want to cover a little broader area, you just pull it back a little bit further. Now you're going to get drop off around the edges, regardless of whether it's 4x4 or 5x5. Excuse me, but it's the same light.
Okay. Rob says, appreciate it, thank you. We've got Paul saying hi. So we have somebody that says HPS is better than LED. Do you guys want to speak to that a little bit?
Jake?
Yeah, sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it's preference. I can speak to the grower side of things. I know Rick and Doug can speak a lot more to the technical side of things. And so we do see some growers that have been growing under HPS for 10 plus years. They make the transition, they struggle with it. There's a major learning curve. Thankfully, these days, there's a lot more information out there that helps you nip that learning curve. And when it comes to the environmental adjustments, the feeding adjustments that need to happen. I mean, if you're applying the same practices for the most part, or even close to, when you switch between these two lifestyles, you're not going to have the same results or the same success. A lot of these West Coast genetics, from what I understand, were bred under HPS. And so some genetics are not going to do as well under one light spectrum or the other. It also depends on how you measure success, right? I mean, at the end of the day, true growers know that the smoke quality is the biggest, if not, I mean, generally the main thing, the biggest factor. And so, yield plays into it, operating costs. I mean, that's where LED tends to have the easier argument, is yield and operating costs, efficiency. There's lots.
Sorry to interrupt and jump in, Jake, but they followed up by saying too much humidity with LED. I bumped up my EC and all of that.
Yeah, LED does change the humidity factor. And so there's usually an adjustment on pints per fixture that you should have in your grow room if you're making the switch. And so that's kind of a whole different conversation. I mean, at the end of the day, it can come down to preference, but I mean, we have tons of growers that are hitting 90 to 100 grams per square foot with these LEDs. And we have a lot of people that are really happy with them. In fact, one really interesting thing, this is kind of a light bulb moment that I had recently, a realization, and I owe this to Rick in more ways than one. I should say Doug, Rick, and the whole SpecGrade team. Sorry, Rick is just he's just the face of the operation. I know everybody, it's a big team effort, but one thing I've seen recently is that we have a lot of repeat customers with SpecGrade, and we have a lot of customers that bought SpecGrade 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and they're expanding in all different states. And it's a really regular thing. And this has stood out to me. And I'm like, this has got to be saying something. You know, I've never talked to somebody and, you know, that was a big SpecGrade customer that didn't make it, that failed and shut their business down. If that ever happened, you know, I mean, because this is a really tough industry. It's a tough market. And so we just have so many people that are returning and expanding and adding 100 lights, adding a few hundred lights. And I think that says a lot. Their lights are 5 years in, still running. They're having success. So it ends up, you know, it ends up kind of being a splitting hairs thing. So CSIC, we could potentially have, you know, a conversation independent of this where we can get into the details and really break down the nuance of what your experience was, what you did, what you didn't like, what your obstacles were, all of that stuff. But it can be a case by case basis, you know, a situational thing. So you know, I've seen some people make some really interesting points about both sides of that argument. I'm not really an HPS expert. It's been about 5 years since I've ran an HPS room personally. There are things I like about it. And so we're studying things about that as we develop new lights. So it's something that we're factoring in. We are listening to the industry. We're listening to what people say. We see that there are other brands that are trying to replicate HPS spectrums. SpecGrade has done that. We had an HPS spectrum a long time ago. It's very expensive to produce, for one. Would not make a very cost-effective light. But at the end of the day, this is a little bit anecdotal, but I would call it a educated guess. I think that the infrared radiation is a major factor, and that's something that you get from sunlight. It's something that you get from HPS. And when you walk into those rooms and you feel that heat on your skin, it feels good. And I think that affects, as we know, how the plants respond. And just mimicking an HPS spectrum is not going to give you that same result. We know that. So you are going to see a wave of people that are touting this, oh, we've got an HPS spectrum. All you HPS guys can make the switch easily. And I don't see any evidence for that being the case. It's really just a spectrum with a little bit more red in it. And that has its own benefits, but it's not the same as growing under an HPS light. So generally what we're looking at is LED to LED, comparing different LEDs. So,
you know, Jake, as a footnote to what you just said, I'm following up with personal conversations with many of these guys that are coming back and ordering a second round of lights after 5 years. And one of the things that they're telling me is that they're getting the same yields in year 5 that they did in year 1. And I attribute that to how specifically to the heat sinking, to how robust we build our lights. And that kind of comes from our experience before we got into horticulture back in 2015, 16, to our commercial industrial light division, where if a light was up 100 feet off in the air, we have to pay to fix it should anything go wrong during the warranty period. And as you can imagine, it's pretty expensive to get somebody up in a bucket truck at 100 feet in the air or in a football stadium. So we decided very early on that we were going to build our lights very robust. I mean, the physics are there. You can't defy them. And at the end of the day, we're dealing with electronics, which are very vulnerable to heat. And the heat is a function of the degradation of the light. So yeah, I'm pleased to say we've taken a light meter to a couple of our growers that are now buying the second round of lights, and the PPFD is the same as it was on our specification sheets, on our cut sheets. That's a long footnote, but that's the truth.
Thank you, guys. We've got another one that came in asking how to purchase lights for my home grow rooms that are 12 by 12. I feel like this is also a good time to mention the Labor Day sale happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Just simply go on to www.specgradeled.com or specgrade.com, and you'll either one, and you'll see the you can just buy them right online and get your 25% off. What is it? Labor 24.
That's
Jake?
correct. The
Yeah.
code is Labor24. And since we are on Instagram Live here, you can click the link in our bio on Instagram. It'll take you right to the shop page. For a 12 by 12 home grow, I would probably recommend, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 9 Vertus 6F 720 watts, I believe. That would be my go-to. And so, yeah, that they are $50, an extra $50 off from my normal 20% off code at, just for this week only. So, yes.
Perfect. Okay. Marco asks, can you say how many pints of dehumidification per unit would be reasonable? Let's say for the Verta 6F 720.
So, Marco, I recently did a post about this on Patreon, and actually it was our good buddy, David Todd, who is the owner of TA Cultivators, who is a cultivation company out of Oregon. And David is, I mean, he's as close to a cannabis genius as I've ever met. His ability to understand and articulate the technical and mechanical side of our industry is pretty incredible. And he has done paid consulting for dehumidification companies, cocoa companies, you name it, all kinds of companies, grows. And I was fortunate to, David and I are buddies. We talk all the time, bounce information off of each other. And I asked him about this because of his experience. And the lines that he told me were 30 pints per fixture is the minimum you want to be at. And 50 is, as David put it, where you control your destiny. And David has pretty incredible results managing large cultivations in his area and around the country. And that's one of the prerequisites for his management is proper dehumidification. It allows him to steer the program in a way that will give you 90 to 100 plus grams per square foot of high quality flower at scale. So that's as good as an explanation as I personally ever gotten on that topic. And so that's the one that I've been sharing as well. But I didn't figure that out myself. So credit to David. Also, side note, wanted to say, what's up, Anthony, Pinnacle, SBMV. Thank you, bro, for joining. If you guys don't already, which you probably do, follow along Anthony's Pinnacle Systems, LLC. He's dropping some good knowledge on UV and far red. Anthony developed a sensor company, environmental control company that monitors and controls your environment. It's compatible with a lot of systems. I have Pinnacle Systems in the grow that I run, and I'm able to remotely access, especially my substrate data is a huge one. And so Anthony just recently got some SpecGrade over his canopies, and he's going to be doing some data collection for us, hopefully moving the needle on.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Someone just said, loving my LEDs, Flight Path Official.
Flight Path.
419 Dank says, I need a light sponsor.
Me too. While we're waiting on more questions, Alyssa, we had a little. So I had kind of like what I see as a common question that I'm going to throw toward Rick and Doug. When I got on board with SpecGrade, I was a SpecGrade customer 5-6 years ago. I've got this whole long story that is a free post on my Patreon, so I'll spare everybody right now while we're in the live. But essentially, it involved me testing through a lot of different lights. And SpecGrade standing out as far as performance goes when all these lights were brand new. And I became a believer in the company and the product at that time. I had no idea why they were better. I didn't know all the things I know now, but I knew that the performance spoke for itself, and this is in 2019, 2018, somewhere around there. Fast forward many, many years later, they're the only lights that are still hanging and working properly. And that was what tipped the scales for me to get more involved with SpecGrade. And through just talking with them and working hard to get their lights over the canopy of the commercial facility that I run, I learned a lot about the LEDs. And I made a 5-part post on my page that details why SpecGrade lights not only outperform all of these other brands that I personally used right out the gate, but then they hold that line over time across 5+ years. And we're seeing a lot of these other LEDs really drop off in performance and fail prematurely. And it's for very obvious fundamental reasons. It's not some big, crazy, secret proprietary thing. As Rick said, they have multiple decades where they're lighting up, professional football arenas and city streets and city ports with high quality LEDs that have to withstand, hurricane winds and crazy weather. And so they know a lot about building a robust LED. And that side of the LED world, this is all very common knowledge, but you have all these people that, props to them. There were growers and other people in different parts of the picks and axes side of the cannabis industry, and they saw the writing on the walls, and it's a quote unquote green rush. And so they get in touch with these Chinese OEMs and they slap a sticker on a cheap light and mark it way up, and they get them out there. And maybe that was acceptable 6 years ago when nobody knew anything, but now we know. And that's been my mission, is to spread this information that I've been exposed to. I'm like, man, that light bulb went off and I was like, how is nobody talking about this? Why doesn't, I've never heard this anywhere else. And it all has to do with how the light's built, mainly the heat sink, which is the aluminum above the diodes, above the PCB board that holds the diodes. And that is what pulls the heat away from the diodes. And that's a major factor that allows the light to deliver its performance over time. And it prevents it from degrading. It prevents the spectrum from shifting, which is plaguing growers across the industry. I've got hundreds of growers in my DMs across the course of the year that are saying, hey man, I used to hit 2.5 and now I'm down to 1.7 and I can't figure it out, and tried all this stuff. And, I started to see a pattern and the dots started to connect. And some of them said, hey, I went back to a new light and my yields went back up. And that's not something you should have to do after 2 years. That's a very subtle, silent killer as the line drops off of that graph. And so that's a major reason I got involved with SpecGrade. And so I saw that they needed help talking to the growers, being LED geniuses. So that's what I'm here to do, is bridge that gap. So as I move forward, one of the things I asked was, hey, why don't we integrate these spectrums? Like, why can't I just turn a button and have the spectrum control my light? That's really convenient. And I learned from SpecGrade why that is, and it's very important. And I get this all the time. I have people asking. And so I'm going to pass it off to you, Doug and Rick. Can you talk about why you made the decision to do separate bars for the UV and far red instead of having them integrated into one centralized fixture?
Yeah.
Really quick, Rick, someone did ask if those are waterproof.
Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, at the trade shows, we dunk the whole light in a pool of water, and while it's on, and so yes, it's waterproof. Just as an anecdotal story, we are held accountable for not only light output, but also uniformity. So Jake alluded to sports arenas. So when we put up lights, somebody is getting out there with a light meter on the 50-yard line, on the 40, on the 30, on the 20, 10, and we better hit those light levels. Otherwise, we're held accountable to make it right. Also on highways and other applications. So uniformity in our commercial division is a huge variable. And I was really surprised when we got into horticulture. Nobody was, at least at that time, and they're still really not talking about it much. It's actually it should be a bigger issue in horticulture than anybody's making it out to be, because that affects you monetarily. your profit losses. If your PPFD is not uniform, then that's costing you money. And that's one of the things that we considered when we designed our light, because it's a wider bar than just about anybody else is using. And that gives you it affects significantly the uniformity levels on your crop. So, beside the color shifting, the spectrum shifting, which is a function of the heat sink, as Jake alluded to, the uniformity goes right to the bottom line on every harvest. You're going to be able to quantify the results using a SpecGrade light. Was there another question in there that I didn't answer?
Yes, that's okay. That's good information.
I got on my soapbox.
That's okay.
You're good. We've got a couple more coming through here if you're all done with that.
Basically, Rick, what I wanted you to talk about is the milliamp, the driver issue. Because look, we've seen lights out here that have spectrum control within the lights, right? And it sounds very cool and convenient that you can either have an app or turn a button. And if you've talked to people that have used these lights, and I'm not going to name names, but there's one brand in particular, they were at the forefront of this technology, and it was really cool. And I applaud them for pushing things forward. Yeah. However, they made one fatal mistake, and they had a ton of RMAs and failures, warranties that couldn't fulfill. The company essentially went under and changed hands. I believe the designs are still the same. I'm sure they've worked some things out, so I'm not trying to bash anybody. But that is a big lesson to be learned for people in the industry. We now have new companies coming out with spectrum control, and they're either controlled under one driver or they have multiple drivers that are housed in a centralized part of the light that you just can't access easily. So if you have issues, you're pulling down a whole fixture, which may be over your week 6 plants. Not easy to do. That's a big problem, right? And Rick, maybe you can talk a little bit about why you chose to forego that technology, and what are the fundamental issues with having centralized control over multiple spectrums in one fixture.
I'm going to go ahead and jump in here, Jake. I understand. So one of the problems with designing any type of spectrum that you can start toying with is how many channels do you need to make it? Is it 1 channel, 2 channel, 3 channel, 4 channel? So think of all your reds, your far reds, those would be on their own channel. You might have 3 different channels of white light clear down to your 400 nanometer set up on these other channels. One, who knows how much of each one to mix, unless you have a $3,000 or $4,000 spectrometer that you can put over your plant and take a measurement right there and then, let alone when you have a larger grow and they're daisy chained together and you have 50 lights in one room. Are they all perfectly going to be in sync? You start messing with uniformity, you start messing with the actual spectrum that you're growing under. Some of the newer companies, they're just giving you the option of kicking on some more red or maybe some more blue. But that's a fixed spectrum. Might be a little better than nothing, but you still have the human factor. And the human factor is if somebody bumps that at the wrong time in the grow, it could cause major problems. What would happen to a grow, Jake, in week 6 if somebody changed the spectrum to something that's incorrect?
Yeah, I think we all know for sure.
Yeah.
How about in regards to milliamp draw? And the last thing.
And then what we do different that I think a lot is high chip count, low milliamp. So our light on top of the heat sinking that we spend a lot of time with burns so much cooler. And that helps make the board last longer. So that's why in a 5-year stint with your original lights, you haven't seen spectrum shift and you haven't seen degradation like you have with some of these other brands where, hey, we might get a huge output in year 1, but we're running at such a high amperage through the board that by year 3, we've already degraded 30%. And I think once you go down below 90% on any grow light, it becomes landfill at that point because you're not operating at the same level you were when it was brand new.
And UV chips degrade a printed circuit board beyond that of normal degradation.
Yeah, you can't necessarily mix UVA on the exact same board as all your other chips because they will degrade the phosphorus in the LED prematurely and rapidly. So, yeah, you always want that to be a separate source altogether.
It's like having a virus on your board.
Yeah, it really is.
And so as you guys expressed to me, to wrap this up so we can move on to questions, having the ability to control multiple spectrums under one driver drastically increases the chances for failure. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And that's what we saw. I mean, this company essentially went under because they had so many warranties, and that's just too much for a company to handle. And that's something that SpecGrade's been, it's very clear to me, they've been very conscious of that in regards to protecting the customer when they design their lights. And so perhaps you could make the argument that you sacrifice a very small amount of convenience, a small amount of more time when you set the light up. And the benefit is that you have a light that's guaranteed to last a lot longer. If you do have issues, it's very easy to swap out and change out, as opposed to a light that has a high failure rate prematurely and is very hard to swap out. So that's what I wanted to get at with that. But I know we, have questions rolling in. So Alyssa, I'll let you.
Yeah, I'm going to back it up a little bit up in the chat here. What type of percentages are you hitting with your lights throughout the grow cycle? I've pretty much got it down, but just want to make sure we're on the same page.
What's up, Joey Grown? I'll speak on this. So with my Linea 600, I can't give you a percentage that's the right percentage. It really, there's a lot of factors that will contribute to that. So I'll give you kind of a blanket answer the best I can. For one, it has to do with the distance that your lights are from the canopy will dictate your percentage. You have a target PPFD. And one thing I have seen is that the percentage required to reach your target PPFD tends to be quite a bit lower with SpecGrade, as opposed to quite a good handful of other brands that I've used. And I've had other growers reporting this to me recently on Instagram, that I only need to use X percentage when the lights are pretty much the same wattage. And I attribute that to the uniformity and how many diodes are on the light. Wattage and efficiency aren't the only factors that move the needle when it comes to how your light performs, of course, even though some brands would have you think that. But to summarize this, I recently had 102 light sorry, hang on. I had a 102 light Fluence Viper room. They were 630 watts each. We changed one of those rooms out with 90 of the second generation Linea, SpecGrade Linea, single bar, high bay LED style, very similar looking light at a glance. And those lights were 600 watts each. So not only did we had 10% less fixtures in the room, each fixture has less wattage, and I ran them at about 10% less on the 0 to 100 intensity chart. Went from an average of 70 down to an average of 60. And on our second run, we broke our yield record, which was, a couple months ago. It still holds the record to this day for a full room yield record after 4 years of operation, and a turn every 16 days on these 102 light rooms. So we have a really substantial reduction in operational costs when it comes to electrical. We have an increase in performance. I mean, from a business standpoint, this is night and day. And, quality, ripening, all those things fairly comparable. So I don't want to try to oversell certain aspects. The objective, what we saw was that we had less operational costs and more yield with a lower percentage of dimming and lower wattage used. So.
Okay. Joey is asking what UVs are proven to stimulate trichome and terpene production.
Rick, you're a little bit, you guys, Rick and Doug, you know more about, spectrums and stuff than I do. I mean, UVA is what we use. UVB and UVC are there's a lot of evidence to suggest that they are dangerous for
Yeah.
people and plants.
I'll answer quickly
Yeah,
on
you can
this
glow
one,
in the
Jake.
dark.
My experience has been UVA. That's what our production model is. We did some very limited testing of UVB and UVC, but the problem is they're the ones that can hurt you. We chose openly as a company to only produce and market UVA products. So once you get beyond that spectrum, I have no more personal experience with it, nor would I recommend it just because of the health safety aspect of it.
We're interested in protecting our growers. So.
Yeah, I don't want to ever put something out that you got to have a biohazard label on. And that's what it pretty much comes down to, UVB and UVC.
Yeah, you really got to protect yourself. I mean, wearing glasses in the grow, something I don't even do enough. I'm probably going to need an eye transplant in 20 years. They'll probably have them on Alibaba by then, but I'll get some. Unless SpecGrade is making some, I'll know that they will be more quality made, and then I'll get them for you guys.
Jaw Grown also followed up to his question by asking, are you dimming the lights after pluck days? If so, when do you raise them back up?
Yeah, I have and I haven't. I don't think it moves the needle. It's kind of a personal preference thing. If you are having a really aggressive PPFD program, 1,000 plus, yeah, I would say it's not a bad idea. I don't think you have to, though. I mean, you're removing a lot of the surface area that captures photons. And so, but if you want to be extra careful with, minimizing stretch, then it's not a bad move. But some people are very business and efficiency focused, and they don't want to let off the gas because you only have however many, 60, 63 days, and you're going to maximize in that time frame. And so that's a preference thing.
Cool. Okay. Marco also followed up to his question before. How much air conditioning per unit? Is this also the control your own destiny answer?
That I can't go into as much right now, but Marco is my homie from Germany, and they're coming online soon, and he and I have done a lot of work together, which is really cool. So, but I don't have a control your destiny answer for that. I mean, I've seen some formulas and equations, some general rules of thumb, but nothing I feel good about sharing here because I don't want to mislead anybody. I'd have to dig into my notes. So at the very least, Marco, we'll discuss that another time, but also a good question. I'm going to go ask David Todd and see if he's willing to share that because that guy understands things very thoroughly. And so he'd be my go-to for that question.
Awesome. Okay. We answered a question, Mr. Rowe, about the Verta 6 and the UV infrared. They are waterproof. Jaw Grown also asked, speak on what percentage your lights are at throughout the veg and flower, and also pluck days are you dimming? Kind of same question there.
Yep. So quantum cultivation, if it looks like you may have just joined, more info on UV and far red and how long to use them. So again, we've got these 2 schedules that we released. And the Dankums hunter, Max did a lot of testing for us, and he was one of the earliest adopters of these supplemental lights. In fact, I wasn't paying too close of attention to the far red, and I had tested them. I probably wasn't using them properly to this point. And then, Max had contacted me. I knew that, between I'd gotten Dylan Mittenmaster some of these lights that he was testing, and then we put Max in touch with him. Max had incredible results, I think he had 95 grams per square foot with these Verta 6s, and they were the 640 watt version, the previous version. And he was running like 54 to 56 day flower times with these far reds. And he was telling me about it. He said, dude, I'm day 52. I'm about to chop these plants. And I was in disbelief. And I was like, dude, I got to come see this. So he had me out, which I'm thankful for. I got to see it in person, made me a believer. And then I started to, deploy them out to other friends and validate. And everybody's come back with the same results. And it really depends on your program and how much you lean toward ripening and a faster flower time to begin with. And there's different practices in cultivation you can do to influence that. But a lot of growers are seeing a 7-day time frame, like shaving 7 days off of strains that they've run before. And if you're already finishing fast and you have a really aggressive ripening program, I'm sure you would still see 3 to 4 days. That's what we're seeing from our customers and reps out in the field. And so, and that's a little bit subjective, when you're talking about scoping trichomes and assessing amber and ripening and whatever markers that you're using to determine whether or not, a plant is done. Everybody's going to have a slightly different perception on what that is. It's not really a black and white thing. So, but those graphs and charts are really great as a jumping off point for far red and UV. If I was going to run UV, which I plan to, once I can get them above my canopies, I'm going to follow that chart. I'm going to start there. And then again, it looks like Anthony from Pinnacle Systems is dropping some real knowledge here in this chat. So hit that guy up for questions. I like he's, I mean that in a good way. I don't came off and like I wish I could be more help, but it seems like he has a deeper understanding of that. He mentioned that you don't want to run that UV in the first 21 days, is what Anthony said, because it'll give you some weird morphology. I didn't really know that. I had heard things like that. But that sounds like interesting information. And I know that he's a very smart, intelligent grower. So I would definitely, keep that in mind. So, but beyond that, that's kind of what we're handing out to growers as a foundation, a jumping off point for their own testing. And, a lot of people are having success with those. We didn't release those charts until we had other people test them, and they're doing well with them. So that's where I would start.
All right, we've got a question. How are the lineas comparing to other models for single tier rooms?
The lineas compared to other models. Well, I did just outline my experience where I saw we broke our yield records with less wattage and less fixtures. And so we have a lot more Verta in the field than Linea, but we're getting, both of our flagship flower lights. That's one thing that I would say, I guess I admire about SpecGrade, is that they haven't like over diversified or made things gimmicky. They don't have all these ancillary controllers and all these other products they're trying to push to you. They just stayed in their lane and refined the main things. And so there's not 10 different types of lights that they're trying to sell. They've got this high performing light, and they have 2 of them. They have their Verta and their Linea as far as flowering goes. And they both have their advantages, and depending on your situation, there's some situations where there's crossover and you could use either light with success, and some where you kind of have to go one way or the other. But we're seeing really great results. In fact, we're waiting on a yield report from somebody that just ran them. And this individual is a very reputable and established grower. And they're saying that they believe that they just hit 100 grams per square foot for the first time ever with no under canopy lights. And they're basing that off of their wet weight after a heavy strip. And they've done a lot of these conversions over time on this room with different lights where, hey, here was our wet weight, whatever that usually is, 1 to 4, 1 to 5. I know that, some growers are, the jury's a little bit out on that one as well, but it's in that neighborhood. And so they took their historical data and applied that. So we're waiting to hear back from that. But we're seeing that. How you're able to measure that, in my opinion, in any way that's remotely accurate, is you have somebody that has a bunch of historical data piled up on results they have, and then you compare it. If somebody puts up a brand new room and puts these lights up, you have less of a point of reference to go off of as far as like drawing a conclusion on the performance. Whereas you have someone that ran other lights for a long time and then switch these in, and you see these yield increases. I'm working with a ton of growers between SpecGrade, Patreon, Instagram. I've only got 4,000 followers on Instagram, but the other day I had 1,300 views on my stories. Like I'm talking to a ton of people, and it's really consistent with the feedback. I have a lot of people that are saying like they're breaking their yield records with these lights. And so yield is obviously not the only factor, and many would argue it's not even the most important factor in this market. And there's truth in that with quality, you know, and growers' practices and the tools they use obviously contribute to that. It's not one thing, it's the whole picture. But yeah, so the yields are looking really good with the Linea, to summarize that.
Good to hear.
Good.
Just have somebody making a comment about how far red makes a huge difference. Been doing this for years. Originally slapped 2 Emerson Effect boards on a Scorpion Diablo back before I started running GML. Somebody else just said, this is awesome. I just took over a grow facility and did not know about these lights. Great to hear. We are running a sale right now. If you shop the Labor Day sale, if you're interested in getting some lights for that grow.
Yep, $50 off our flagship lights, an additional $50 off. So they're really like $325 off of their normal price. Yeah, we've got a Labor Day sale going on right now for anybody that's just joining in. If you were looking to trial these lights or get your hands on them, now's a good time. It ends on Labor Day. So yeah, make sure everybody knows about that. Let's see.
Followed up by saying we want to say the Verta fixtures look like very quality fixtures.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you everybody for joining.
Thoughts on Think Grow Model H from Jaw Grown?
Well, it's a good question. They're a very relevant brand. There's a lot of popular growers using that light right now. There's a lot that can be said for marketing. And so time will tell. We've done a lot of research. Rick and the team have cut open dozens of lights. And maybe you've seen Rick's suitcase, or a briefcase, I should say. It's turning into a suitcase. It will be a suitcase soon. But it's a briefcase of lights, which I have.
That one?
That's the one. So Rick and team take a saw to these lights and they cut the lights open and they analyze a few different things. One of them, and this is all, I'm just a vessel for the message here. This is all Doug. I'm just becoming a good mouthpiece for this. But they're measuring the aluminum that is behind the PCB diode board there. And so we cut open Think Grow in addition to all of these other lights. So not to pick on them, but they were among the thinnest of heat sinks.
Go ahead and put it back.
No.
And so for whatever that's worth. And they had among the thinnest conformal coating. What can we say about this? Well, these things protect the lights. They ensure the performance lasts over time. And it's not really debatable. When you don't have these, the diodes are exposed to high amounts of heat and they are subject to cracking. They're subject to skewing in color, which is very subtle, often indiscernible to the human eye. And they had little to no conformal coating. This is true for many brands. I mean, many of the popular brands, I mean, conformal coating, which I learned from SpecGrade, is a silicone coating that goes over the diodes. If you don't have a lens here, which you see, the main light in this picture is the Flora 300 watt veg light from SpecGrade that I use over my veg plants. On the right, you've got what looks like probably a Foge, and you've got these optics, and you've got, they used to be glass and now there's some form of silicone optics. And that's not a new thing. That's something that SpecGrade took into consideration as it was expressed to me. And they did research. Those optics are relatively common out in the industrial LED world where we're lighting up non-grow related things. And there were fundamental issues with them as far as degradation. And in an industry where, as Rick has said it, your livelihood is based on spectral accuracy, consistency of your spectrum. it's a big deal. And so careful thought went into not including that in the fixture. However, since they don't, because you lose 7%, as you can see there, 7 to 11% light loss. So you have to up the wattage of the light and the electrical use in order to make up for the loss that you have from the optic lenses. So in place of that, SpecGrade has this conformal coating, which is a silicone coating over the diodes. And from what we've measured, it's anywhere from 5 to 12 times as thick as all these other brands that we've measured. It's expensive to put on these lights. And so there's a good reason why many of these companies are not doing it, because they want to make money. They want to make their margins. Many of them probably didn't know that this would have this much of an effect on the lights. They may not even be realizing or correlating their designs with the RMAs that are flooding in. But we've been talking to somebody who was a representative for one of these really big companies. And again, I don't want to name names, but some of these guys are drowning in RMAs right now. However, you know, we see a situation where one of these very popular light companies that we've confirmed has particularly, what would be the right word? They don't have enough heat sink, if any at all. They don't have any silicon conformal coating protecting their diodes, which drastically increases the chances of premature failure in a very obvious way, where the light goes bad. And I see this all the time. I get tons of DMs of growers sending me this, or the silent killer, which is almost worse, where you've got this spectrum that is skewing usually towards yellow. Silicon, when it's exposed to high heat over time, has a tendency to skew yellow, which is what those lenses are. And you have these growers experiencing these reduction in yields and plant health issues, and a lot of them can't explain it. And it seems like, you know, you have hundreds of people saying the same thing, and the dots start to connect. And so, but however, some of these companies, like I was competing on a quote with a company the other day, and they were selling their lights for like $950. Someone was trying to get 20 lights, and you know, they were a couple $100 more than ours. And then we were competing with the same company on a giant 1,000 light quote, and they were like $100 some below ours. And to me, it demonstrated very clearly that, you know, what I felt was like predatory, you know, something I'm a little sensitive to as a grower that's been green taxed to death by all these industries and these green rush companies. Just predatory like margins that I don't know. I just don't personally feel they're unacceptable. It's not, and so my waking up to this and exposure to it it's helpful as navigating the industry as a grower that has this compressed, saturated market where the pack prices are way down. And we're all trying to survive and make a living and feed our families. And then you have companies, you know, that have this wide range of what they're able to sell lights for. The fact that they're able to sell their lights so much cheaper than ours, well, it's very obvious that they're way, way less expensive to produce because they don't have any of these materials. Aluminum is expensive to put over the diodes, but it makes your light last a lot longer. It ensures your performance over time. As we've said, you get the same results on your 25th harvest that you do on your first harvest. And it's not failing after 2 years. I mean, I think people are starting to wake up to this. So, and as you can see here, Rick and the team have done a ton of research on this and collected data, and they've schooled me up. And I put together a 5-part post on my page that highlights what I've learned, but their knowledge goes even deeper than mine. And so,
yeah, Jake, we've got people agreeing with you, saying that Think Grow has killer marketing, otherwise ... LOL. Diodes completely going out or flickering. Just have some conversation about between the two going on. Marco just says, thank you as always. You're fantastic. Hope we'll be seeing you in Europe soon. We are going to wrap up here soon, but if we just want to answer, we have one more question from Jeff. How are your diodes and spectrums compared to the expensive Fosse, I don't know how to say that word, LED?
Foge, yeah.
Foge,
I think it's
thank
Foge.
you.
I've always debated on the pronunciation, but how are diodes and spectrums? Well, I think the diodes are going to be pretty comparable. Spectrums,
Yeah, we're all using the same diodes. And, you know, beyond that, Doug and I have a saying here in our company, you can't defy physics. And the physics part of it is everything from, you know, the heat sinking to the conformal coating to
How much copper's in your PCB
yeah,
board?
the copper in there. There's so many variables, and you know, our light will stand the test of time. And last thing we want to do is, you know, when we ship a light out, we never want to see it again. You know, and if a light goes down in some grow, you're losing 16 square feet of real estate, productive real estate. And, you know, it's whereas in our commercial area, our commercial division, light goes down. Yeah, we got to get it repaired, but nobody's losing money over the fact that it's, you know, inoperable for, you know, for a day or two. So, no, this is more, it's more critical in this industry than it is in our commercial industry. And like what Jake said, I think the industry is just beginning to wake up to the fact that you get what you pay for at the end of the day.
they say buy nice or buy twice.
Yep, I agree.
I got all these little phrases I love to wear around like a hat. The other one is
there was one. Oh, you only buy once when you only cry once when you buy quality.
yes. Don't, as they
I
say,
would like that one.
don't get caught stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. That's one
There
that
you go.
rings a bell with the so.
Awesome. Well, we've just got some people having some conversation, kind of dropping off here. We've been going for about a little over an hour. So I think we'll wrap it up here. Do you guys have any final things to say to everybody still watching?
That's it.
Yeah.
Check out.
Yeah.
Shop to sale. Thank you everybody for joining.
Take a look at the website.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining in. If anybody has any questions that didn't get answered, you know, Seasick talking about the HPS, dude, please feel free to message me. I'd love to chop it up with you on that. Everybody else, thank you guys for chiming in, for the support. You got my ear if you ever have questions about anything. You can DM the SpecGrade page, and yeah, don't sleep on the sale. This is a crazy deal for just a week. So yeah, we'll be doing this again. This is number 3 for AUAs, and we'll probably be doing one next month, eh?
I'd agree.
Peace.
Thank you everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.
Bye.